From relying on food stamps to reacting to my surprise pregnancy in a Starbucks bathroom and fear of being homeless as a single mom, to starting my own business, moving into my new home, celebrating $200,000 in revenue, it has been quite the journey to say the least. Here is the entire inside scoop from serious lack and why me victim mentality to an overflow of abundance, assurance, and taking back my power. And exactly what the driving factor was that turned it all around. This is a really, really juicy one. Let's get started. I'm your host, Tiffany Chung, your go-to for all things marketing, mindset, and manifestation. I grew my online business from 0 to beyond 6 figures in 8 months. My purpose is to empower women to step into the highest, most aligned versions of themselves. If you are ready to take charge of your life, learn how to design a wildly successful business, and leave limiting beliefs behind, you've come to the right place. You will learn the actionable tips and step-by-step strategies on money, manifestation, and social media. It's time to step into your role as boss, to raise your vibration and tap into your unlimited potential today. Welcome to the Social Reset Podcast. I'm so excited to share this story because it reminds me of the metaphor of the iceberg, where you can see the point of the iceberg coming out from the waters, but there's so much happening underneath in the ocean, in the depths of the ocean, that you do not see. We see a lot of other people's success, especially when it comes to social media, where it's a one big highlight reel. People share that they get a new car and that their business is doing well and so many things are succeeding, people getting married and having babies. And so rare do we see people sharing everything it took to get to that moment. And for me, I've always been very transparent and vulnerable with my story. It's actually how I started my platform, and I'll get into that in a second. But I feel like there's so much power in being transparent and being able to share your story and allow it to impact others and really share what you've learned from it. For me, I want to be able to share the takeaways and the terrible nights of staying up crying and wondering where my life was going to go and what was going to happen, and just being so uncertain and so scared, to now feeling like I'm living my life in complete alignment and I'm very intentional about what I do and I am my most authentic self. And there's still so much learning to do. We're never done learning. We're never, getting to a point where we're like, all right, yes, this is it. I officially know all the things. It's not possible. And it's not meant to be that way. So, but I do want to share what I have learned and what I've taken away up until this point, because I feel like I've been through quite a lot in the past several years. And I want to share my story from the very beginning to where I am today. And I hope that it empowers, inspires, and uplifts so many of you. So let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about kind of that first year of college for me. So when I started college, I was 17 and I was about to turn 18 November-ish. And that was right around the time that I found out that I was pregnant. And it's so funny. I found out that I was pregnant in a Starbucks bathroom. I had my boyfriend at the time, my daughter's dad, buy a pregnancy test from the CVS because I was living at home with my parents at the time. And I didn't want to take it there and they were home. And so the closest bathroom that I could get to was a Starbucks bathroom. And the most ironic part of it, and I can't believe I still remember this, was there was a line for the bathroom. It was one bathroom, a small Starbucks. And there was this woman standing in line in front of me with a stroller. And I believe she had, a toddler next to her and she had a baby in the stroller. And I was just looking at her and I was like, oh my God. And I hadn't taken the test yet. And so I was filled with all these emotions. And I remember taking the test and going, no, absolutely. It's not true. There's no way. No. This is not happening to me. And this is a theme that continues to rear its ugly head over and over and over in my life. This whole concept of why is this happening to me? Why me? Rather than taking responsibility for every single thing that's happened in my life. And honestly, I feel like that's the biggest, there's so many takeaways. That was one of the biggest takeaways for me. But there was young me, 18 years old, about to turn 19. And I was sitting there in this bathroom and I felt numb. I didn't even instantly cry. I didn't even really know how to react. And so I left the bathroom, and then my daughter's dad, like, he saw the look on my face. And so we stood out there and we both cried. And it was so shocking, and we didn't know how else to respond. So at that point, our relationship was kind of at this rocky, imbalanced state where it was not good. It wasn't serving either one of us. Without going into too much detail, we didn't really recognize it at the time. And so we decided to, stay together and do as much as we could to try to make it work, because we loved each other and we wanted to do every single thing that we could. And I felt like we did. And so at that point, it was November. And so I held it in as a secret for weeks. And I actually made an appointment with my doctor to get an abortion. And I had the consultation. There was a date. And I ended up finding out I was pregnant so late that my first ultrasound, or my first doctor appointment, was an ultrasound. And so by the time, I don't even remember, the timeline gets a little blurry at that point, but I remember being in the doctor's office, and I remember being able to see her on the monitor, and they were asking if I wanted to see her, and I said yes. And as soon as the doctor left the room, I just started bawling. I just started crying. Call it divine intervention, call it God, source, the universe, whatever you believe in, just came down in that moment and was like, you're meant to have this baby. And I couldn't explain it. It didn't make any sense to me. I 100% believe that women should have full bodily autonomy to make decisions over their own body every single time. But for me, the choice I made was to keep her. And it was terrifying. I had no idea what I was going to do. I literally was in shock, and I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew that for some reason we were meant to be bonded. And so from there, it kind of kicks off this entire whirlwind of upheaval in my life. I transferred out of San Francisco State, which is where I thought I was going to be for the next 4 years, and ended up going to a local community college. So yes, I went to school all the way up until I gave birth, and then I took 2 semesters off and I went right back in. And I'm actually still in school, finishing up my last year right now, taking 1 or 2 classes at a time, depending on my circumstances or situation. So yeah, I remember taking finals like 5-6 months pregnant, because I was, about to pop. And so at this time, I'd moved out of my parents' house. My sister was in high school. It was a really difficult time for them and for me at this point, because I was so young, and because I did grow up in such a traditionally Asian home, and because I was so young, it was so difficult to even have a conversation. And so that's what it led to. And then I remember when I first told my parents, it ended up being Thanksgiving Day right before we had dinner. I didn't plan this. I did not plan this at all. It was just a knowing. Sometimes moms just know. It's annoying. Now I'm a mom, and there are some things that I just know. But I remember I was like, man, it didn't have to be Thanksgiving Day. It was right before we were about to sit down and have our Thanksgiving meal. And my mom was just like, she knew. And she was like, you're pregnant, aren't you? And then we both cried, and it was very, very emotional. Looking back, I feel like I can have humor about it. Trust me, I was not laughing. I still remember these like flashbacks to like IHOP, because it was like the closest like open restaurant at the time, where my dad sat me and my boyfriend down at the time talking about like, okay, what's your financial situation? How are you going to take care of my daughter? And how are you going to plan for the next several years? How are you going to take care of this baby? I just remember like the family next to us was probably like, what the hell is going on over there? Like it was just so excruciating. It was excruciating. And then telling my friends, telling the people around me was also really difficult because, the initial reaction isn't, oh my goodness, congratulations, because I was so young, because there were so many things up in the air. And I remember one of my friends telling me explicitly, Tiffany, you are not responsible enough to have a baby. You should go and get an abortion. And I remember those words sticking through with me when I did have her and when I, was learning to take care of her as a newborn and just feeling like, wow, am I really that irresponsible? Can I do this? Did I make the right decision? Right? So many emotions going through my head. And it just goes to show what you tell yourself, your thoughts, your belief system, everything that you decide to take on is so fucking powerful. It's so powerful. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your values influence your actions, influence your decisions, influence your words, your relationships, and influences your entire life. Your entire life. And I wish I would have gone back and just given my 19-year-old self a big hug and said, you got this. She's going to turn out great. Everything is going to be okay. Oh my goodness, I'm starting to tear up. Yeah. And so I really wish I could have told myself a lot of affirmations and just positive things that I could have told myself back then that I just didn't believe because I was so young. And so her dad and I ended up moving in together for a short while before we did end up separating for good. And so that time was also really rocky because I just was dealing with a lot of different emotions. I was still in school. I was actually working. So I was working at home at the time. He was also going to school. He was also working. And so we were just trying to figure everything out. And at this point, the church that I had grown up in, my parents, the youth leaders, nobody in leadership or anyone that I was really around other than some of the friends that I knew that were my age, every elder just completely stopped talking to me and also stopped talking to my family. They never said congratulations, never even spoke to me after that, which was insane and not the way that they should be living out what their truth is. And so that was extremely damaging. And just there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of guilt. There was just a lot of emotions that weren't productive for the situation that I was in at the moment. Everything that they preached about love and acceptance and inclusion and whatnot just completely fell apart. And so at that point, it was a lot of, people falling off, friends that were no longer friends, or people saying that they supported me, but, they never cared enough to ask how I was doing. And so there was a lot of shedding. There was a lot of things falling off and releasing that was no longer serving me in order for me to move into that next level. Of course, eventually, her dad and I didn't end up working out. Won't go into all of those details as to keep that private and to respect his story. He ended up moving out. And then so I stayed in the place we were at for a little bit longer until the landlord just said, hey, I want this place back for my family. You need to go find another place. And I just felt like it was another upheaval. And at that point, I had also lost the job that I had. It was my first job and they were making some changes and they ended up letting go a couple of people from the team. I was one of those people. And it was just really terrifying because I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do here? I have this, I believe she was 1 year old around that time. She was so young and I was just terrified. I had no idea where I was going to live. I had no idea where I was going to go. It was just shocking. And I remember at that point, I started falling in love with the online community on both YouTube and Instagram. This was when the beauty community was really popular. If you remember all of the makeup tutorials and the makeup gurus and the, extravagant parties and things like that brand launches would, involve. I loved it. And I started at home. It just became a passion and something that allowed me to have some me time as a single mom that was working and going to school and just really unsure of her future. I was able to sit and just express myself creatively through makeup. And I started my own, beauty blog. I started posting looks on Instagram. I started getting connected with an amazing community, a lot of which I still keep in touch with to this day. If you know me from my Stay Beautiful days, beautiful with 2 F's because it's a play on my name. Thank you so much for supporting me. So that was when I started on Instagram. That was where everything started. Was, I was struggling with postpartum depression. I was feeling just really terrible about myself as a woman, as a mother, as a human, because of all of the things that had happened in my life prior that I just mentioned. And I was struggling with really low self-esteem. I didn't love myself. I barely even knew how to, just take care of myself because I was taking care of this newborn. I was breastfeeding her. I ended up breastfeeding her for 2 years, which I'm super, super proud of, actually. And I feel like I did everything I could to make sure that she was happy and safe and healthy. And I stopped taking care of myself. And so makeup, even though it is something that can seem very artificial, it was just a way for me to connect with, this artistic, creative side of me that had nothing to do with, thinking or, being smart. And I was doing really well in school at the time as well. So it's something completely different and outside of that. And that's when I got exposed to the online community. I started partnering with brands, which was so brand new at the time that brands would literally say, "What do you mean by a sponsored partnership?" And I would have to explain to them, these are the deliverables that I can work on for you. And this is how it's going to really grow your brand through my exposure. And this is how we can set it up. These are my rates. This is what you can expect. And I literally had to explain to brands what a partnership would look like with me as a beauty influencer. And it ended up going really well. It started paying my rent. I found a new place. I found a new job. And things were starting to just make a little bit more sense in my life. But of course, there were still a lot of sleepless nights where I just felt so broken. I felt so lost. I was so young. This was me, 19, 20, 21, where a lot of my friends were having what seemed like so much fun, turning 21, drinking, going to the bars, partying. And there I was staying up till midnight after my, very young daughter went to bed, doing schoolwork and just on the grind, right? And I never went to a party in high school or in college because I only went to like 1 year of college. And so I was like, man, I feel like I'm missing out. I want to go and spend time with my friends. I want to enjoy being young. And there was actually a lot of shame around that as a woman. And in my own culture, my mom had always put like me and my sister first. And so me going out to see my friends was just like, it didn't make sense to her. And every time I was even out for a lunch date with a friend, people would be like, oh, where's your kid? Where's your daughter? Where is she? And it's just like, I couldn't be reminded that I couldn't even take a moment to myself. And it just was very, very frustrating. And so going through postpartum depression and those first few months feeling like I couldn't connect with my newborn because of postpartum depression was scary. I was terrified. I was like, what did I do? I sat there and I was like, what did I do? I was terrified. I was so unsure of where these emotions were coming from. And by the way, this is so common in women and it isn't talked about enough. So I started to get my shit together. I started seeing a therapist at the time, and it was so beneficial to just have a space, a safe space to just share all of my emotions and just to have a sounding board and allow someone to share with me, hey, this is why you're acting this way. This behavior stems from this in your childhood, or this is something that you're trying to meet a need with because you lacked this when you were growing up, or you're lacking this now for whatever reason, or you're believing this belief. Here's how we can reframe it and decondition it and just continue to like recondition the way that I was viewing my life. And that's where I felt like I started regaining my power. And we never lose our power. We don't. Sometimes it feels like we do. We just have to regain it. We have to remind ourselves that we are a bad fucking bitch, right? And so for me, it was reminding myself of that and going, okay, I can take control of my life. I can make things happen. I can release negative, toxic cycles in my life. I am allowed to be empowered. I am allowed to be loud. I am allowed to be strong. I'm allowed to set a good example for my daughter. Growing up, I was always told, like, you're so loud, Tiffany, you're so loud. Like, you have a lot to say. Like, it makes so much sense because I have a defined throat center in human design and I am meant to be loud. And it's another reason why I feel like I'm a really good coach. Like, I truly believe that the work I do through coaching is transformative because I see my clients' lives literally change. And so I feel like I've completely found what I love to do. But we're not there yet. So at this point, I was starting to, get my life together. I was going to therapy. I had a new job. I had a new place. And I was starting to really just fall in love with being a single mom. There is something about that bond that you create with your child when you are a single parent. And we started, co-parenting. And so he would have her half the time. I would have her half the time. And the time that I would have her, I don't have anyone to hand her off to. I can't say like, oh, can you go watch her? I'm going to go and do this. Or I'm going to go take a shower. I'm going to go to the bathroom. No, it was all me all the time when she was with me. And so it made it really difficult for me to be able to spend time with myself and to nurture my own relationship with myself. And this was around the time that I started realizing how important it was for me to take care of myself as a mom. There's this quote that says, if you are not busy, meditate for half an hour. If you are busy, meditate for a full hour. You need it. You need it. You need that time to sit with your emotions and to see what comes up for you. And for a lot of the time, our emotions just need its own space to be acknowledged and identified in order for it to flow through us, in order for us to release it. So emotions aren't as scary as we think that they are. It is really just, it's just an energy. It's just a thought. It's just a feeling. And the more we allow it to come to the surface, the more we're able to release it and identify it and understand, why are we feeling this way? That way it doesn't get suppressed and come out in wild forms, in just insane forms, where we don't recognize, like, why are we crying? Sometimes when you start crying about something and then you're starting to cry about all of the things that have been pent up leading up to it. Yep. It's because you might not be allowing your emotions to come up as they do. And so now my morning routine includes meditation and sitting with my emotions and checking in with how I feel and doing some deep breathing in order to just see what's coming up for me that day, allow it to pass through me, and allow me to learn what I need to learn from it. So at this point, back to the story, at this point, I was doing really well with my content creation brand that I was building. If you scroll down far enough, you'll see all of the posts. I don't know if anyone even actually wants to do that, but you can if you want to and just see what my life looked like back then. I don't want to archive them. I've got thousands and thousands of posts on Instagram. I feel like it's just a whole part of my journey. And so it's allowed to be there. So I started getting, more opportunities for speaking and being on panels. And I was a fully monetized content creator. So the parties that I mentioned in LA with Makeup Geek, which was my favorite, and then Too Faced and Benefit and Urban Decay, and just collaborating with brands like Ulta and Sephora and Neutrogena just felt amazing. I was like, wow, I can really set the stage for how I want, my income to look. And at that time, I was working a day job at this office and I didn't enjoy it at all. It was something that I felt like I was good at, but it wasn't something that lit me up. I would walk in and just drudge myself to my desk and just, peel my laptop open, and I would just sit there, and it was just not something where I felt like I truly shined. And so at this point, I was also just able to tap into all of these opportunities and everything that I was learning. And I had grown organically. My own platform around this point was like 50, 60,000 followers. And I'd done it all organically. So I started teaching other people how they could do it too. And the certain things that I use, methodologies, strategies, the different things that I felt like would be really beneficial for people to learn. And I shared that on my blog. I shared that on panels and different speaking events. And eventually I was like, you know what? I should host my own event, because at that point I was just helping other people and speaking on their panels and being invited to speak all around San Francisco and San Jose. And so I was like, I'm going to do my own Instagram masterclass. And so I did. It sold out the live tickets. And there were a lot of virtual seats as well for people being able to join us on Zoom, which was amazing. Little did we know that's all we were going to do for the next year. So this was around January, actually, of 2020, before we knew that the year was going to kind of go up in flames. And that was my first event that I did on my own. And so afterwards, I started working with a few of the students to offer some free coaching sessions, just as a bonus and as a thank you for showing up to my events. And I loved it. I loved it. I started falling in love with the transformations that I was able to track, the results they were getting, and how it lit me up inside. And at that point, the pandemic started to spread. And I was working for this very small startup at the time, and they took a really big financial hit previously. And then they weren't able to sustain, people on the team. And so they ended up letting me go. And so initially I started interviewing. I was like, I need to find another 9-to-5. What am I going to do? And so I had this interview with this very sweet woman for a really big company, actually, that I was really excited about. And I was on the call and we were just having a conversation, and I was just being authentic about the things that I was doing. And I was like, yeah, I've got a client session after this, and this is what I'm doing, on the side. And I just love it. And she just saw how I lit up when I talked about what I loved. I must have had like some sort of glow around me, because it was such an intense passion that I was discovering at the time. And she almost like under her breath, she was like, Tiffany, look, you're going to have to put in the same amount of effort and investment and time and commitment, into this position at this company. And so, you might as well do that for your own business. And I think at the time, I must have just brushed it off, because I was still like, well, I really like this open position and I feel like I would help the company. And they were making a lot of money. And they were headquartered in San Francisco. And I was like, well, this would be a good opportunity, right? I mean, it was just that societal conditioning of like, you need to find a corporate job after you graduate, and this is what it needs to look like, and this is how it should be. And I was so worried about like, are they going to like me? I want them to like me, versus like, do I even like this position? And if I was really honest with myself, no, I wasn't. I just wanted something that was going to pay the bills and look really good on a resume. So I kept thinking about what she said, and I kept thinking about it. I kept thinking about it. And I started pouring more and more into my business, because at that point I was making no income, because I lost my job, and I wasn't going to be able to pay rent the next month, because living in the Bay Area is hella expensive. And I didn't really have a savings account. I don't think I had more than $1,000 in savings at the time, because I was working. It wasn't minimum wage. It was just a little bit over. I was like making $21 an hour or so. And I was only working like 20 hours a week, because I still had to go to school and I was taking care of my daughter. So I obviously wasn't making that much money. And I started falling in love with this passion that I was creating. And I was like, you know what? I might as well launch it. I launched my coaching program. And at that point, I had also built an online community of over 14,000 women creatives and entrepreneurs via this Facebook group that I ran. And it was really exciting to be able to connect and uplift other women that were doing things similar to me. I would share tips on influencing and partnering with brands, monetizing, how to choose ethical brands to work with, etc. All of the good stuff. And I loved it. And this community also loved it. And so when I launched my coaching program, I was blown away by how many people were like, yes, I'm in. Because it was the first paid offer that I had ever released. And up until that point, I was doing everything for free content. It was, I was not getting paid for any products or services that I was creating. Any money that was coming in from my brand and monetizing my platform was coming from brands that I would do sponsored collaborations with, sponsored videos, sponsored posts, sponsored stories, etc. So I never launched anything of my own that had, value. And I was blown away by the amount of responses. And I remember, one of my very first clients at the time, like before we even got on the phone, before I even sent her anything, she was like, oh my goodness, take my money, save me a spot, I am in. And it helped me realize that this was my true passion, and it lit me up, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I would wake up in the morning, I would go to bed at night, and I would work really hard, right? And I worked really hard to build what I had. And now I talk a lot about the toxicity of hustle culture and working hard because, you feel like you have to, or overworking yourself versus inspired action and, working and pushing yourself from a place that lights you up and finding that balance. So I went all in on my business, and I started getting introduced to entrepreneurs like James Wedmore and Manifestation Babe, Catherine Zenkina, and Amy Porterfield, who runs Digital Course Academy. And I was like, wow, these people are really successful, and they're online entrepreneurs where they have, a launch schedule where they launch courses and programs and they do coaching. And I was like, I can do this. I want to do this. And so the very first thing that I manifested was a $10,000 month. I had never seen more than maybe $3,000 a month, if that. So yes, I was making some money from brand collaborations and I was working my 9 to 5. But again, it wasn't something that was a full-time opportunity for me to the point where I could live off of it in the Bay Area as a single mom. So I manifested a $10,000 month, and a lot of it truly came from me working on my mindset around money and success and business. There were a lot of beliefs that were no longer serving me. I went into business thinking that I had to work really long hours, thinking that I had to reframe a lot of this. And I have an entire episode on, my money mindset and how I went from zero to multi six figures. But I had to, the biggest thing I'm sharing with you is I had to lose my old identity in order to receive my new one. The universe is going to teach you the same lesson over and over and over and over until you get it. So asking yourself, instead of, why is this happening to me? Remember in the very beginning, I was constantly asking myself, why is this happening to me? Why me? Woe is me. Take pity on me. Like, why is this happening in my life? And now I'm switching it to, all right, what can I learn from this? Why is this happening for me? Life is not happening to you. It is happening for you. Asking yourself, if there's a pattern in your life that keeps coming up, where is it coming from? What is it coming from? Is there something in your life that you're doing that's out of integrity, that's out of alignment, that doesn't line up with your values and doesn't line up with what you're attracting, right? If someone is committing fraud, this is an extreme example. If someone is committing fraud or stealing or abusing money in some way, but yet they're trying to manifest and attract $10,000, it's not in alignment. That value belief system is not in alignment. And so, yeah, you might be able to hustle your way to 10,000 or 100,000, but it's not going to keep you fulfilled. It's not going to be enough. And the big part of it for me, and going from where I was to where I am now and continuing to allow my business to evolve and going from manifesting $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000, close to $40,000 months, was allowing myself to shed my old identity and to take on a whole new one. To identify in detail exactly how I want my dream life or dream day to look, exactly what I want to do and how I feel and who I'm with the moment I wake up, and exactly what I want to feel and experience as I'm experiencing my successes. How does it feel? What am I going to do when I get there? What is going to allow me to change and evolve in order to become the person that I want to be? And how can I live as if the version of myself that already has every single thing that she wants? And every single thing allowed me to move on to the next, right? Getting pregnant allowed me to experience the very, very downfalls of my life. The lowest point and falling in love with beauty blogging, which allowed me to get my jobs in digital marketing. Everything that I was working in, my day jobs were all digital marketing and social media. That allowed me to build experience, that then allowed me to be a really good coach, which then got me to where I am today, and the podcast and the entrepreneurs and the network and the community and the clients, all of the things that I've attracted because I had to learn the lesson that life was teaching me in order to move on to the next. And now I know life is happening for me. I know it's constantly teaching me and evolving me, molding me, and continuing to grow me. I take full responsibility of every single thing that comes into my life, not in a way where I'm blaming myself and shaming myself or letting it get me down, but just acknowledging, what am I doing that has attracted this thing into my life? If it's something that I don't want, right? It's something that is teaching me something. And if we knew every single thing that would happen in our life, how boring would it be? Where would the suspense be? Where would the lessons be? If I knew everything that was about to happen at 19 years old when I was, a brand new mom, I would just be like, oh, okay, well, I know it's all coming, and I probably wouldn't put in any of the work. I probably wouldn't have worked hard to get my business off the ground because I had no idea I was going to hit 6 figures in 8 months and now multi-6 figures. If I knew that, I probably wouldn't have put in the long hours. I probably wouldn't have done those hard nights of researching and educating and all the things I needed to do in order to move to the next level. And I truly believe the success of my business is in direct correlation with the success of my personal development and how much I nurture my mind and my spirit, my soul, my body. Those are all things that have allowed me to move to the next level. And people ask me how I turned my life around, and it was all just being aware of my thoughts, creating my reality, switching my mindset, reframing and releasing things, opportunities, people that were no longer serving me, and deciding that I'm going to regain my power. I'm going to take back control, and I am allowed to manifest and co-create with the universe, with God, in order to create and curate my dream life. I believed that there was no other option and that I was truly meant for more. And I started to work towards that result, believing, acting, thinking as the version of myself that already had everything that she wanted. Every single thing I went through allowed me to be exactly who I am today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts about this episode. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, share it on your Instagram stories, and tag me at tiffanychung.co. I truly appreciate interacting with every one of you. Catch you all on the next one.